Welcome back to Switch to Linux. Well, today we want to talk briefly about the possibility that Microsoft is starting to compromise Raspberry Pi. Very interesting. And this actually comes from a couple people that use Raspberry Pis that are kind of observing what's going on. Now, this is for the most part an innocent move, but at the same time, it is one which is indeed quite controversial. So we get this article from Nixcraft, and he does a lot of tutorials and such with Linux and terminals and Raspberry Pis, and he releases this article just this week, and it says, heads up, Microsoft repo secretly installed on all Raspberry Pis Linux OS. So first, let's go ahead and talk about what this actually means and what it actually is covering. This is if you are using the Raspberry Pi OS, or what used to be called Raspbian. So this is the customized Debian for Raspberry Pis. Now, what they're trying to do and what their general approach is that Raspberry Pis are oftentimes used for education, as Microsoft is used for education. And they're starting to see this partnership come together where very silently, without documentation, without any updates to any changes in the Git repos, all of a sudden now a Microsoft signing key and a Microsoft repo is appearing on Raspberry Pis. And I can understand a portion of this, but some of it makes not a lot of sense. Now, right now, the only thing in that repo is code developer, and he has it listed down here in the article. Basically, it's three things. We have code exploration, and code insiders. So these are all applications for the Visual Basic Studios, the components needed to do some basic programming. The weird facet of this is that these actually are getting installed even on the basic headless server, and what you have to have a GUI to use this particular application. So there is one build of Raspberry Pi OS that has everything you need for development, and it already has the software installed and has for a long time, and there's no real big deal with that. And that's okay. Then we have the desktop version, which I can, at least to a degree, maybe put some type of installer in there, maybe some portion of a menu in there. But the headless version, it doesn't make any sense. And you say, well, it doesn't install anything. Well, not yet by default. But the problem is you're adding a Microsoft repo, and you are pinging that repo anytime there is an apt update. So let's go ahead and have a look at the article, and then we're going to look at some of the form exchange. And then I actually have a Raspberry Pi server set up here with the Raspberry Pi OS Lite on a web server that I haven't updated in about a month or so. So let's go ahead and update it and see if we can spot these issues coming on down the pipeline. So let's go ahead and dive on into this Nixcraft article. He says here it's a little useful computer. Of course, I'm using it for servers. I have a video coming up soon where we're looking at using this as a microscale NAS server. So there's I take a lot of interest in this. I actually just bought 2 Raspberry Pi 4s for production environment things. I use a Raspberry Pi 2 in production environment stuff. So this is very relevant to me as a person that switched to Linux. Get the hell away from Microsoft. I'm switching to Element and Matrix to get the hell away from Microsoft. I don't want anything to do with that company. I don't use Word. I don't use their services. Right now, I'm stuck sort of with Skype, but most of my clients now were switched over to Element. So there you have it. So this is interesting. So he kind of goes in here. Here's what his layout is. So this is his particular Pi. It's at 192.168.2.180 on his network. And I have, I'm logged into one on my network as well. So what he's doing is he's looking at the sources list here. And you can see that in the sources list, we have this VS Code. This VS Code list, this is the list that is a Microsoft repo. This is the Visual Studio's code repo that is automatically being installed. And if you do a catalog search on this repo, he has a picture here, it's hard to see. But if you do a catalog search on this, it returns it returns the package for here, which is packages.microsoft.com. And then if you grep into the package to see what all what all applications are there, and this little code snippet is going to identify all of the packages available, and it has VS Code, it has the code exploration, and it has the code insiders. Again, the problem with this is that code is not going to run on a headless system. There's no reason for it to be on the light version of this. There's no desktop environment, which you have to have. Then it adds through the package list a ping back to Microsoft, and your IP address, your hardware version, and other things can ping back to Microsoft when that has occurred. He talks about why this is bad news. He does a very good, well-reasoned response. And he has a lot of good solutions. Let me read through his why is this bad news bullet points here, because this is certainly relevant. And by the way, it adds a Microsoft signing key as well, which basically allows Microsoft software to run on your Raspberry Pi quite quietly. By using Force MS repo on Raspberry Pi 2, MS controls the software I install. For example, when I run apt install app, I will get an apt distribution and modified by MS. Maybe they will do nothing evil, but I don't want anything to do with them. Number 2, hardcore Linux users like me or anyone who works in InfoSec/IT will never trust Microsoft or Raspberry Pi OS to install such a repo secretly. Again, as he identifies, this happened 2 weeks at least before any change notifications were made on the change logs or anything else. Number 3, Microsoft may collect more information about Raspberry Pi and Linux users as many try to reduce their digital footprint, such as your IP address, and build a profile about you. Number 4, every apt-get update command pings back to the Microsoft repo. And number 5, if you or any family members logged into Microsoft ecosystem, such as GitHub, Bing, Office/Live, they could identify and track you back when you're using the same public IP address at home. So if you're okay with that, no big deal. Now, he has a couple of options, and these are neat options. Use Arch Linux. There's Ubuntu for Raspberry. Isn't it funny when Ubuntu for Raspberry Pi is going to be considered as more safe than Raspberry Pi OS? Go figure that one out. We have OpenSUSE, FreeBSD, OpenBSD, NetBSD. There is the Debian for Raspberry Pi. I looked into this, and I will be looking into it because I have not yet started the video where I'm going to be building a NAS on Raspberry Pi. If I can do it on Debian, I'm just going to do it on Debian rather than take the easier route of going with the Debian with the Raspberry Pi OS Lite. And then he actually has here, if you want to use Raspberry Pi OS, he goes through how you can change this. Number 1 is you can do a host file to kill the Microsoft packages. I will probably end up doing this globally on my NAS because I have those capabilities in my own home office. Secondly, you can hold back Raspberry Pi sysmods. This is going to be the package that's going to add this. You can remove the trusted key, and then you can go ahead and touch this directory and then write protect the trusted directory to make sure that the Microsoft trusted key cannot be reinstalled on your system. Now, if you do want to use VS Code, there is a version of VS Code with telemetry removed. He has that information. And this is actually a very interesting and very significant post going on. And here is the forum discussion about this. And I'm actually going to go down to just under his post and just kind of tell you what's going on here. So there's a lot of people that are saying this is an issue. There's some things, but this is what we end up hearing. Thank you, everyone, for your feedback, but this won't be changing because it makes the first experience for people who want to use tools such as VS Code easier. And that is an absolute 100% nonsense answer because that code, that program will not even run on a headless Raspberry Pi. There is zero reason that needs to be on the headless Raspberry Pi code. No reason at all. And as some people have indicated in this thread going back and forth, if you're getting started with development on a Raspberry Pi, learning to add a repo is easy and something you will need to know how to do. So if somebody needs it, teach them how to do it. Or, hey, just have an install button on your menu. I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the existence of this thing. I just don't want it pushed on my Raspberry Pis personally because I want absolutely 100% unequivocally nothing to do with Microsoft. Period. It's not because they have bad, horrible products. It's that they're just abusive to their customers and the data that they have. So there is a lot of back and forth. Let me just scan through these real quick, and then we'll jump on over to my Pi and see what we actually are going to get. So it's absolutely not fine. Why an extra bloat just for me to discover it and try to work out why an MS-owned repo is now being checked for updates that I have zero to do with. There was no announcement. The release notes are available after the install. GitHub repo for the package was old and contains no mention of the inclusion to check on any other repos. Now that, I believe, has been rectified. This does not answer the question. I think it'd be imperative that a new user should learn how to add, edit text files for system configuration. Adding a repo is far from difficult, no matter how it is done. This was slipped in without notice, and now people have noticed it. It's being handled poorly. You should expect some backlash when you release patches that do extra unexpected things like check a repo you had no idea existed, let alone manually add a repo. A notice that would catch the obvious search terms would have been enough to announce this small but obviously controversial change has been made. To do better next time, announce arbitrary changes to the repo a little and explain unexpected behaviors. And so you can kind of look through. Again, this is just to add VS Code. I'll let you guys read through this. This will be linked in the description down below. So now let's go ahead and have a look at what's going to happen on my Raspberry Pi as I run the update, and we're going to go ahead and see what this looks like. All right, so here we are. We are logged into my server. First, we're going to go ahead and let's go into the etc apt directory, and we can see here, let's go into the trusted GPD directory, and you can see that there is nothing listed. Let's have a look at our sources list. See, we have Raspberry list. And you can see here, this is all that is in the Raspberry list. No big deal. So let's go ahead and do the apt update. And let's go ahead and look at our upgradable list. So we can see in here, there's the one package that's going to change this is going to be the Raspberry Pi sysmods. There's really nothing else over here that looks like it's going to work. So let's go ahead and do our upgrade. So we're done with the update there. You'll see the error here is amavizd-new. For some reason that doesn't work. I've not been able to figure that out. It's a email filter for ISP config, which I don't even use on this particular build. But hopefully that won't get in the way of the rest of this. If it does, I'll just pause the video and resolve it and come back. So let's go ahead and do sudo apt update again. And now that you can see that we're doing sudo apt update, you can see that now it is pinging a Microsoft server 4 times actually is what we're getting. So I'm wondering if there's now actually more stuff here. I guess maybe it's just 4 different versions here. But there we have it. So let's go ahead and have a look at our list. Now we have VS Code and we have Raspberry Pi list. So this was added without me knowing anything about it if I didn't know to look for it. And you can see here that this is going to Microsoft repos. Let's just go ahead and edit that guy out. Oh, I came in there without sudo, didn't I? Let's go ahead and come in that with sudo and get rid of that guy there. And back up a directory, and let's go into our trusted directory here. And there we have, we now have the Microsoft trusted key here. So let's just remove that crap. There we are. So I've removed the Microsoft trusted key and I've killed the repo there. And the problem is that will probably come back if I do not do those extra steps. But here we have it, a completely headless, no desktop environment, Raspberry Pi on my, I mean, this is something that I use in my office as a piece of my production material, silently added Microsoft onto it. And yeah, people like me in this type of situation, we're going to be pissed when this type of stuff happens. And the Raspberry Pi group just cannot get it through their stinking head that there's people that have a deep aversion to Microsoft who want to use their products, and if they'd like to stay relevant in the realm of these types of computing builds, they need to cut this crap out. They need to cut it out, because if this is where they're going to be going, I'm okay if the things exist. I'm not okay if they throw it onto an unsupported package base as it is. And that's what we have. It's an unsupported package base. I cannot run these Microsoft programs on this build the way it currently is. There's no desktop environment. There's no reason for it to be there. And there's other alternatives out there. And I don't know, I might just start examining those other alternatives rather than relying on the Raspberry Pi if they're going to start shoving Microsoft keys and Microsoft crap inside of my distributions. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera off now and mitigate this particular piece of production I have. And then I need to go in and start SSHing into the rest of my Raspberry Pis to see if they're cramming Microsoft crap down it now as well. So there we are. Has Microsoft compromised Raspberry Pi? Let me know in the comments down below. And in the description here, there will be a link to the forum article, the forum thread, and to the article that we read from here today, just so you are aware. Now, you can use a Raspberry Pi with other operating systems if you have the capabilities to do that within the scope of what you're doing. That might actually be a good way to do it as well. So there we have it, folks. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux. Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.